I stood in the kitchen of the house I once shared with my late husband, still wearing my black morning dress, the fabric heavy against my skin like the weight I carried every day. The clock ticked loudly on the wall. Then the front door opened and Daniel walked in from the airport, suitcase rolling behind him, his broad shoulders filling the doorway. He had come to help me sort through his father's things, just as he promised after the funeral. He set the bag down and stepped closer to reach for a glass on the shelf above me. His chest brushed against my back through his thin shirt. That sudden warmth, so alive, so different. A shiver ran down my spine before I could stop it. I caught the scent of his cologne then, sharp cedar mixed with something faintly musky that lingered in the air between us, nothing like the familiar aftershave my husband used to wear. My fingers tightened around the edge of the counter. He was only trying to help. Why did my body notice? That first evening we sat at the same dining table where I had eaten with my husband for 30 years. The wood still carried faint scratches from all those quiet meals. Daniel moved around the kitchen with easy confidence, boiling pasta while I watched from the doorway, the steam rising and carrying the scent of garlic and fresh basil. Bare skin against bare skin for half a second. I pulled away too quickly, pretending to adjust my napkin. Your stepson. You buried his father 6 months ago. What is wrong with you? I smiled anyway, thanked him for cooking, and tried to focus on the taste of the food. But every time he reached for the pepper or the wine, that same accidental closeness happened again. The air felt thicker than it should. My breath kept catching in my throat like I had forgotten how to let it out naturally. He talked about his flight, about work, his voice low and steady, and I nodded, but my mind kept drifting to the way his shirt stretched across his shoulders when he moved. I hated myself for noticing. Grief, I told myself. It was only grief making everything feel raw and electric. Every morning after that we sorted through my husband's clothes and papers in the study, boxes stacked around us like small monuments to a life that ended too soon. Danielle's hands would accidentally touch mine when we both reached for the same folder or the same old photograph. Each time it happened, a little spark traveled up my arm and settled somewhere deep in my chest. One afternoon, while I was folding an old sweater that still carried my husband's faint scent of pipe tobacco and wool, Daniel placed his hand on my shoulder in comfort. The contrast hit me hard, the familiar fabric under my fingers and the unexpected heat of his palm through the thin sleeve of my blouse. My breath caught sharply. I closed my eyes for a moment, telling myself it meant nothing. It was only kindness. Only shared sorrow. Yet when he squeezed gently before letting go, something inside me trembled. I wanted to lean into that warmth. I wanted to stay there longer than I should. The thought shocked me so much I stood up to fast, nearly knocking over a box. I need some water, I muttered, escaping to the kitchen with my heart hammering against my ribs. He was 28. I was 50. His father had been gone barely half a year. Every rational part of me screamed that this awareness was wrong, dangerous, shameful. But my body kept remembering the brush of his chest, the cedar on his skin, the steady pressure of his hand. I stood at the sink splashing cold water on my wrists, staring at my reflection in the window, reminding me who I was supposed to be, the grieving widow. Not this. Not whatever this fluttering ache was becoming. Daniel called from the other room, asking if I was all right, his voice carrying that gentle concern that made my knees feel unsteady. I answered that I was fine, tired, but I wasn't fine. Something inside me was waking up after years of quiet sleep, and it terrified me how good the stirring felt. Later that same day we kept working side by side, the silence between us comfortable yet charged. When our fingers met again over a stack of old letters, neither of us pulled away immediately. The pause stretched. One heart beat too, until I finally drew my hand back. Cheeks burning. He didn't say anything, but I felt his eyes on me for a long moment. I told myself it was only grief making me notice these things. Only the loneliness talking. Nothing more. It had to be nothing more. Yet when evening came and we sat across from each other again at dinner, the air still hummed with everything we weren't saying. We began sharing a bottle of red wine after dinner, the way my husband and I once did on quiet evenings that now felt like another lifetime. The first pour was careful, almost ceremonial. Daniel lifted his glass with that gentle half-smile, and I mirrored him, telling myself it was only habit, only comfort. But the second glass loosened something deep inside my chest. Words spilled easier. Childhood stories about him tumbling out between laughs that surprised even me. Our knees brushed under the small oak table, and neither of us moved away. The contact stayed there, warm through thin fabric, sending tiny pulses up my thigh that I tried desperately to ignore. This is harmless, I thought. He is family. But God, after years of nothing, why did even that small pressure feel like electricity humming under my skin? I poured another measure, my hand trembling just enough to make the wine swirl. He was recounting a silly memory from when he was 10, voice low and warm, and I found myself leaning forward without meaning to. The scent of cedar from his skin mixed with the rich notes of the wine, wrapping around me like invisible threads. My breath caught every time our eyes met across the candlelight. I kept telling myself to pull back, to remember who I was. A 50-year-old widow still wearing her grief like a heavy coat. Yet the ache blooming low in my belly whispered otherwise, a quiet hunger I had long forgotten existed. One night the laughter died into a softer silence. Daniel mentioned a girl from his office, someone who had been texting him late into the evenings. He said it casually, almost dismissively, but the words landed like a stone in still water. A sharp twist of jealousy cut through me, so fast I had to set my glass down. Why did it matter? He was young, free, his life just beginning while mine felt paused in amber. That night I lay awake in the dark, listening to the distant sound of water running in the shower down the hall. Each splash echoed in my mind, painting pictures I had no right to imagine. Droplets tracing paths over warm skin, steam rising, his hand moving through damp hair. I turned toward the empty side of the bed and whispered into the pillow, voice breaking, "Yuri, 50 years old. A Chi-S young enough to be your son. Stop this madness before it swallows you whole." The words felt hollow even as I spoke them. My body refused to listen, heat pooling where loneliness had lived for too long. I pressed my thighs together under the sheets, ashamed of the way my pulse quickened at the mere thought of him so close, separated only by thin walls and years of propriety. Sleep came in restless fragments, dreams flickering with cedar and wine and forbidden proximity that left me flushed and restless by morning. The next afternoon we tackled the attic together, heavy boxes of old books and forgotten keepsakes balanced between us on the narrow ladder. Dust motes danced in the slanted light as I reached too far. My foot slipped on a worn rung. For one terrifying heartbeat I was falling. Then Daniel's arms were there, wrapping tight around my waist, pulling me securely against him. My body pressed fully into his for several long, endless seconds. I felt the solid firmness of his chest rising and falling rapidly against mine, the steady thunder of his heart beating just beneath my cheek. He radiated through his shirt. Soaking into me like sunlight after endless rain. When he finally set me down on solid ground, our faces remained inches apart. His breath mingled with mine, warm and uneven. The scent of cedar mixed with clean sweat filled the small space between us, making my head spin. I murmured thank you, barely audible, my voice trembling with everything I couldn't say, then fled to my room with my heart pounding so hard I thought it might shatter. Eyes squeezed shut, trying to steady the wild rush inside me. Shame burned hot across my cheeks, yet beneath it something far more dangerous stirred. A craving that had nothing to do with grief and everything to do with the way his arms had felt like safety and fire all at once. I was supposed to be mourning, not noticing how perfectly my body had fit against his, not replaying the rapid beat of his heart like a secret melody only I could hear. The widow in me screamed to stop, to lock this away forever. But the woman waking after years of quiet. She wanted to feel that closeness again, even if just for a moment longer. I pressed my forehead to the cool door, listening to the faint sounds of him still moving in the attic, wondering how much longer I could pretend this was only kindness, only shared sorrow, when every inch of me already knew it was becoming so much more. Late one evening the house felt too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ribs until you can't ignore it anymore. I pulled out an old vinyl record from the cabinet. My husband's favorite jazz piece, the one he always played when the world felt heavy. The needle dropped with a soft crackle. and the melody unfolded slow and smoky, wrapping around us like an old embrace I thought I'd forgotten. Daniel glanced up from the book in his lap, his eyes softening in that way that made my stomach twist. "Dance with me," he said quietly, standing and offering his hand, "just like Dad used to with you." I hesitated, heart already stumbling over itself, but I let him pull me up. The living room lamp cast long shadows as we began to sway, slow and careful, the way people do when they're afraid of what might happen if they move too freely. His hands settled low on my back, warm through the thin fabric of my blouse, fingers resting just where the curve begins. My cheek brushed the cotton of his shirt, soft and slightly worn, carrying the faint scent of his soap and something deeper. Like sun-warmed wood after rain, the music curled between us, notes lingering in the air, and for a moment it was as if time had folded. My husband's arms, this room, that same song playing while laughter used to fill the space. Tears slipped down my cheeks before I could stop them, hot and silent, but beneath the grief surged something sharper, a rush of heat that bloomed low in my belly, spreading outward until my breath came shallow and uneven. His body moved against mine with such gentle certainty, solid and alive, nothing like the emptiness I'd grown used to. In my head I begged silently, "Please don't let this feel so right. Please don't make me notice how perfectly we fit, how his warmth chases away the chill that's lived in my bones for months." I closed my eyes, fighting the pull, yet my hand tightened on his shoulder, drawn there by a gravity I couldn't name. The phone rang suddenly, slicing through the almost sacred quiet like a warning. My sister's voice came through, light and probing, asking how I was holding up with that young man still staying there so soon after everything. She said it casually, but the words lodged under my skin, planting tiny thorns of guilt that prick lead with every breath. "Isn't it a little strange?" she added, her tone to knowing. I mumbled something about him helping with the house, hanging up quickly, but the damage was done. My cheeks burned as I returned to the couch where Daniel had paused the record, waiting. That same night we sat close watching an old movie, the kind with soft lighting and whispered dialogues that mirrored everything unsaid between us. Our shoulders brushed, knees almost touching under the shared blanket, the proximity sending tiny sparks along my skin. Then the doorbell cut through the tension. Sharp, unexpected. We jumped apart like startled teenagers, my heart slamming against my ribs as I hurried to answer. It was the neighbor, dropping by with a casserole and condolences, her eyes flicking curiously between us before she left. The door clicked shut, and the almost moment hung unfinished in the thick air, leaving me flushed, trembling, the ghost of his nearness still tingling where our bodies had been. After she was gone, I couldn't settle. I started noticing everything about him with a hunger that frightened me. The way his jeans sat low on his hips when he reached for a glass, the sharp, clean line of his jaw tightening in concentration as he fixed a loose cabinet hinge, the gentle timbre of his voice when he caught me quietly in the kitchen and simply said, "I'm here." Whispering to the woman looking back, "You're just lonely. This is grief wearing a familiar face. It will pass." It has too. The words sounded reasonable, almost convincing in the harsh bathroom light. But alone in bed, with the house breathing softly around me, the memories returned stronger each time. The slow sway of our dance, his hand so low it felt like a promise and a sin at once. The way his breath had warmed my hair, guilt twisted through me, heavy and sweet, like dark honey I knew I shouldn't taste. I turned into the pillow, body aching with a craving I hadn't allowed myself in years, the kind that makes you press your legs together and bite back a helpless sound. How had this happened? He was my son's friend, young enough to carry the future it already lived. Yet every quiet moment with him felt like waking up after a long, cold sleep. Dangerous, alive, impossible to ignore, I lay there in the dark, pulse thrumming with the weight of what I wanted and what I knew I couldn't have, wondering how much deeper this pull could grow before something inside me finally gave way. The storm hit without warning, wind howling against the windows like it knew every secret we'd buried. Power flickered once, twice, then surrendered completely, plunging the house into velvet darkness. I fumbled for candles, hands shaking more than the flame I finally coaxed to life. Daniel found more in the drawer, our arms brushing as we set them on the floor between us. The small living room glowed in study, shadows dancing across his face, softening the lines that still carried traces of boyhood I tried so hard not to see. We sat cross-legged on the rug, closer than we should have been, sharing the last of the wine straight from the bottle, because glasses felt too formal now. Thunder rolled overhead, vibrating through the floorboards into my bones. He spoke first, voice low, almost lost under the rain. I've always admired you. I've always admired you. You know, even back then, the way you held everything together, strong, beautiful, I never told you. His words landed soft, yet they cracked something open inside me. I looked down at the candle flame, heat rising to my cheeks that had nothing to do with the storm. His hand moved slowly, deliberately, tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. Fingers lingered on my cheek, warm, slightly calloused, sending a current straight through me. The air thickened, heavy with the scent of melting wax and something sharper. Rain-soaked earth seeping in through cracked windows. I forgot how to breathe properly. My lips parted on their own, body leaning forward just a fraction, every year of careful woodwood crumbling like dry leaves and wings. His face drew nearer, eyes dark and searching, breath warm against my skin, so close I could almost taste the wine on his tongue. Gravity pulled, relentless, and for what rambling heartbeat I let it. Morals dissolving into the flicker of candlelight. Just as our lips hovered a breath apart, the light surged back on without mercy. Harsh brightness flooded everything, exposing us in an instant. We froze, eyes locked, chests rising and falling in ragged unison. The sudden glare felt like judgment itself. 30 years of marriage, his father's memory, the quiet whispers society would weave. All crashed down at once, cold and unforgiving. I pulled back sharply, whispering, voice barely holding, "We can't. This is wrong." But the words came out fragile, lacking any real fight. Danielle's gaze never wavered, heavy with the same helpless pull I felt twisting in my chest. Morning arrived too soon, gray light filtering through curtains that cowled and hid what lingered between us. We moved around the kitchen like dancers avoiding collision, eyes carefully averted while coffee brewed. The faint cedar scent still clung to the air, stubborn reminder of nights that had shifted everything. Nothing had happened, not really. Yet the house felt forever altered, charged with unspoken electricity. I stood at the sink, rinsing a mug, heart heavy with guilt that pressed like stones. And alive, so dangerously alive, with a forbidden desire I could no longer pretend away. Chans trembled under the water. Daniel spoke quietly from behind me, careful distance in his tone. I might stay a little longer, to help with the house, if that's all right. I didn't turn, didn't protest. Just nodded once, the motion small and telling. The tension stretched between us, suspended like mist that refuses to burn off, unspoken, unresolved, impossibly alive. How long could I keep pretending I didn't want what I now craved with every quiet breath? And in the silence that followed, I wondered if the ache would ever let me go, or if I even wanted it to.